Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Rick9G. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about Star Trek, the original series. Thanks so much for all the support you have given me. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing specifically on Mr. Spock and the very popular gesture that he always does and all the Vulcans do on the show, and in, of course, the subsequent history, the live long and prosper gesture. Now, how was this created? When was it created? I'm going to answer all of that for you in this episode. Many of you may actually think that it was Gene Roddenberry, which was the creator of Star Trek, but that's actually incorrect. That's not how it happened. Now, the appearance of this salute or this hand gesture was first seen in the second season opener, Amok Time. In this particular episode, in the throes of his Pon farr mating period, Spock must return to the planet Vulcan to meet his intended future wife, betrothed from childhood. Now, all the images will be, of course, from this episode, and Mr. Spock, of course, was played by the amazing Leonard Nimoy. Now, he felt that there should be some kind of distinctive greeting amongst the Vulcans, so he was very much into the process of creating this character and expanding upon the lore. Now, he thought it had to be something very similar to a handshake or a bow, but he wanted to do something different. Now, it may interest you to know that an early script had Spock kneeling before the Vulcan matriarch, who places her hands on his shoulders. It's kind of like with royalty in England and dubbing someone a knight. But Nimoy was actually against this idea. He didn't like it. There was nothing wrong with it per se, but he thought that it wasn't exactly what he was looking for and true to the character. Now, previous episodes had already shown that Vulcans are telepaths by touch. So therefore, a touch on the shoulders would kind of be an invasion of privacy. So what Nimoy did, he drew upon an experience which he had from his background. Now, of course, Leonard Nimoy was Jewish, so in his Jewish background, he had a familiar salute. Now, many mistakenly believe that the live long and prosper sign is actually some type of two-fingered peace sign, but that's not actually true. Especially if one is Jewish, you would know where this would come from, and that's that this comes from the pulpit of a childhood synagogue that Nimoy went to when, of course, he was a child. Now, I think a greater appreciation of this salute comes back to the actual story. And I call it a salute or gesture throughout this video, but it means exactly the same thing in regards to what I'm saying. Now, this Vulcan greeting is based upon, as I said, a blessing gesture used by the Kohanim. Now, in case you don't know, the Kohanim are the genealogical descendants of the Jewish priests who served in the Jewish temple. Now, a little bit of history. The Jewish temple was destroyed in 70 AD, so it is, of course, no longer standing, and modern Jews no longer have priests leading the services as they did in ancient times. And so there's no more sacrificial system as they used to have, but now there are remnants of this religious historical tradition with the Kohan blessing ritual that is performed on certain holy days. Now, what would happen is the actual blessing is done with both arms held horizontally in front around shoulder level with hands touching to form a Hebrew letter, Shin. Now, to keep it simple, that basically stands for the meaning of the name God. Now, Nimoy modified this gesture into a one-handed type salute that is upright. It was no longer more than a gesture or a blessing, but as I said, it's an upright salute. So there's a lot of meaning behind this. In fact, when we hear them say live long and prosper, when one would do this just on the regular day to maybe another Trek fan, you're actually kind of giving them a peace and a blessing, and that is the double meaning there. And I think that is really, really interesting. Now, a little bit more on this service. The worshipers who experience this blessing in the Jewish tradition, they're not supposed to look at the Kohanim while the blessing is being given. And this is really interesting because it ties in itself to Leonard Nimoy. Now, there's nothing essentially wrong. You're not going to vaporize if you look at it, but it's usually not customary to do that. But in fact, Leonard Nimoy could not resist the curiosity of looking while this blessing was taking place. And you're actually supposed to look down and not look at the Kohanim, so you don't really see what gestures they're doing. And he noticed that sign. He noticed the separation of the fingers that would be so iconic today And I think the best thing to do is finish up with Nimoy's words himself and how this was a very powerful thing that he created. According to him, this past event was a special moment where the Kohanim blessed the assembly. It actually moved him very, very deeply because it possessed a great sense of magic and theatricality. These are his words. Now, he had heard that the indwelling spirit of God was too powerful, too beautiful, too awesome for any mortal to look upon and survive. So he immediately covered his face with his hands, but of course, he had to peek. And when he did peek, he did see the separation of the third and fourth fingers into that salute, and it stuck in his head. When it came time to do this episode, it all connected, and that is Star Trek history, guys and gals. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys and gals. As you know, I really usually don't dive deep into the topic of religion or politics on this channel, but I felt that this was a really touching story because it did have a very specific, I guess, connection, and it moved Leonard Nimoy very spiritually, and it became an intrinsical part of his character, Mr. Spock, and therefore it went into the other series, of course, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and to this very day, and so it's inseparable from that story. So hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time, guys and gals, and don't forget, be hopeful. Thank you to my Diamond tier patrons, Andrew B., Ricky, and David D. And thank you to every single one of my Patreons where I have exclusive content. Be sure to look in the description below for merchandise, Patreon exclusive content, as well as playlists where you can find other TV shows and sitcoms that I think you'll enjoy. We'll see you all next time.